what has to happen is that you have to be able to manage the expectations of that person. You have to be able to manage the expectations and the for want of a better word, the upheaval that may arise among your existing staff members. The
Yes.
way to go around that would be sensitization and that kind of thing. But once again, all ex-offenders will not be troublemakers. We might be surprised to see that we have persons who are ex-offenders that want to reintegrate and reintegrate extremely well.
Hi. So back to Mr. Mosley very, very quickly. Mr. Mosley, I just want to know, how can persons contact you or get involved in Yes before if they want to get involved in Yes, how do we get involved in Yes? Youth Entrepreneurship Scheme, that is. And what is the likelihood of them getting in? Is it a heavily packed program? Is it heavily populated?
Well, no, our program is open to, as I said, all persons who fit within the age criteria. Our direct contact number is 535-3835. That's the main PBX. We have currently 3 youth enterprise officers that interact directly with clients. Also, we have a dedicated email address, yes@barbados.gov.bb. You can send us an email, tell us your name, your age, your business interests, and we would get back to you, set up an appointment. Generally, it is online now because of the impact of COVID, and we would start the process there. Once training is available, once any of the services are available, you are contacted. And what we like to do is first have the contact with the officer, just so the officer gets an understanding of what type of business you're in, the level, the status that you're at. Have you registered the businesses yet? Are you only at the idea stage? Do you need to do a bit more research? So once that process follows that line, then the client is open to all services and they can benefit from all services. I will say this, that you can approach us with just the idea, because we go from idea to enterprise. You can approach us if you have already started a business. It is not registered as yet. We help you through that process. If you are already registered and you're looking to take the business to a higher level, you need probably like a more legal aspect of incorporation. We assist with that. So we try our best to, as I said, promote the whole aspect of self-employment and business ownership, because the reality is a lot of young persons now have that drive. They are not prepared to sit in a job for 10, 15 years without promotion and being frustrated. So they prefer use their passion and use their God-given talent to start their own businesses and to have the autonomy, to be as creative and innovative as possible.
So, Mr. Mosley, thank you for that. I want to know, let's paint a picture here. If I were in prison right now, set to come home next week, I just served a sentence, let's say a 4-year sentence, I'm coming home next week. Is there any provisions made for me to sign up with you? For Yes? Are there any provisions there?
As I said, once the custodial sentence is over, you are all of our services are available to you. What I will also add here is that we are also working with Prison Fellowship Barbados to actually start a training program within the prisons. There was previously a program dealing with entrepreneurship, but what we are going to do is we are going to use the leverage of the private-public partnership and actually procure some training that can be delivered within the prison. I'm assuming it may have to be on a virtual platform, but what this will do is this will help strengthen the whole program, so that when you come out, that you would have the foundational skills already to prepare you to move directly into business. So you wouldn't have to wait until your custodial sentence has ended. But while you are still in prison in that period where you are preparing to exit prison, we hope that we can get the program up and running, that persons can benefit from the training, benefit from the foundational skills of entrepreneurship, of business ownership, so that when they come out, that the move to yes would be seamless. They would already have the knowledge, the basic knowledge, and it would just be a continuation of what has already started. And then you could benefit then from all the other services that would help to move your business, from idea to enterprise. So, as I said again, yes, at barbados.gov.bb, send us an email. Let us know what you're doing, and we are willing and ready to assist you and start the project with you.
Thank you, Mr. Mosley. Idea to enterprise. So, Ms. K. Small and Mr. Pilgrim, I'm coming to you very soon, but I just want to know from Ms. K. Small, what advice would you give to someone about to be released from prison, whether it be HMP Dodds, GIS, whatever? What advice would you give to them as it relates to getting a job or signing up for the Youth Entrepreneurship Scheme? What advice would you give to them?
Well, I would encourage them to look at their skill set, look at their qualifications, because that's what employers look at. That's how employers measure really what your potential contribution to the organization could be. Your qualifications, skill set, your work experience. Work experience, if you've been incarcerated for a bit, would not be there. You may now have lower skills because you were unemployed for a period of time. But I would advise them to look at those things, and where you can skill up, where you can improve on your qualifications, do just that. Reach out to entities like Yes, ask for guidance, that kind of thing, just so that you are able to put yourself in a position where you can secure some form of employment.
Yes, but I just want to play devil's advocate here. I know that you said promote your skill set, promote these beautiful things, but do I hide the fact that I was in prison as well, or do I put that on the table up front and center? Because I feel as though that may be to my detriment. What do I do?
Well, I will share a funny story with you in a minute.
Please.
It is best that these things be known, because they will come out. We are in a small, closed society. So it's only a matter of time before somebody says, oh, you got Tyrell working for you. Tyrell went to prison. You understand? So it becomes common knowledge. So to avoid strange surprises, you can put that on the table. But what I will tell you is that HR professionals, we are trained to look for gaps. So if you apply, regardless of your qualifications and that kind of thing, and we see a gap on your resume, rest assured it's going to be a flag.
I understand.
So you understand, it's going to be a flag. So why hasn't Tyrell been employed for the last 4 years? 4 years is a long time. So that, when I asked Tyrell, what's happening here? Why is there this gap? That is his opportunity to share information with me.
Well, thank you for that, but we're going to pause now for a short break and a side call, and we'll be right back with you. Stay tuned. This is the Listen Up Accord. Hi, caller. Hi, so we don't have a caller, sorry about that. Mr. Pilgrim. Mr. Pilgrim is a psychologist who was trained in both Barbados and the United States, a very skilled man. Since then, he has worked in the criminal justice system as a mental health professional since 2005. And he has been a psychologist at HMP Dodds since 2008. Mr. Pilgrim, tell us a bit more about yourself and your role at the HMP Dodds.
Hey, thanks for having me. Well, my role at the prison is quite, let's say, multifaceted. As it pertains to this program, what I am involved in is preparing inmates and offenders from the time they get to the prison for their life after prison. Um, what I do on a daily basis is help inmates identify the areas in their lives which require um, work, where areas in their lives where they believe they can change and improve. And as you can imagine, when persons find themselves in a place like prison, there are several issues which would need to be addressed. So, like I said, what I will do and I play a part in is helping these persons figure out where they went wrong, and of course, you know, I would focus on the psychological components of their offending behavior, and those could be quite complex, quite deep seated, and they really require a team effort. And so a big part of what I do is collaborating with other individuals, both in the prison and outside the prison. So these be the other agencies that are primarily involved in the criminal justice system. So a lot of what we do is come up with treatment plans and approaches that we believe would remedy their the behaviors and the thinking that contributes to their offending. So that is quite a task. It's very involved. I will meet people with different degrees, different levels of motivation to engage in this type of work, because very often the outcome, what can be achieved from this work is not immediately obvious to someone who's just entered into the prison, because what I'm trying to do is help them imagine a different life for themselves, which could be several years away. But everything that happens in the prison, every program, every initiative is focused on achieving the goal of helping that person stay out of prison and to live a healthy, well-adjusted life.
Yes. So Mr. Pilgrim, from your experience working in prison, near and far, what are some recurring psychological factors or conditions that cause persons to do what they do to go to prison, if so?
Well, so that is a difficult question to answer, because persons generally find themselves in prison for such a variety of reasons, and it's not always clear what is the psychological motivation for their actions. What I can say is that very often, the problems that people have are rooted in their childhood, in their family experiences, in their wider socialization. Those things all go a long way towards shaping an individual's personality and their thinking style. Persons very often, due to the groups that they're a part of, they learn different ways to solve problems. And as you could imagine, some of those ways are far less effective than others. Very often individuals would have learned or internalized violent and aggressive ways of resolving conflicts. And they also will quite often utilize what we would call maladaptive ways of dealing with painful emotions. So some of these maladaptive strategies would be things like excessive drinking or use of drugs, and then other risky um, and particularly dangerous behaviors. So those are the types of things that people will generally be involved in um, when they find themselves before the courts,
Mm-hmm.
and so as like I said, those when you put all those things together, and someone is facing a difficult sentence, and they're overwhelmed with all the realities of being in prison. We struggle sometimes to help them understand what they need to focus on, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, so there's several things that someone may present with when I encounter them at the beginning of their
Mr.
sentence.
Pilgrim, I want to ask you the reverse to that question.
Mhm.
I just asked you, what psychological factors cause persons to go to prison, maybe. Now I want to ask you, does prison cause psychological harm to inmates?
Well, I wouldn't. I don't like the idea of psychological harm per se.
Mm-hmm. What would you call it?
What most inmates struggle with, especially in the early stages of entering prison, is adjusting to the environment. Prison environment can be very, very harsh and uncompromising to someone who's never experienced that level of restrictiveness before. Um, so when persons are new to prison, um, figuring out the patterns and the rules and the expectations for them when they're first there can be very difficult. Persons are oftentimes um, struggling with the separation from their relatives and their friends, and also the loss of autonomy and personal freedom that we take for granted in the world. Um, so very often the harm is localized in those early stages of being in prison. Um, so very often once people get through that those early phases and recognize that there are persons there who will help them and support them, and that they will still be able to maintain contact with their people, um, they adjust, and their frame of mind will improve. So the harms of being in prison are are less psychological. I think as Miss Kia Small and Mr. Mosley would have mentioned before, um, what I what I've seen as an issue is that very oftentimes people, they become de-skilled in certain ways. Other persons become undergo something we call institutionalization, where they develop an over dependence on all of the facilities that are available to them in prison, and in many ways they they are less able to aid themselves in the way that we would expect of the average adult. Um, so the psychological component or the psychological impact of being in prison is usually um, decreased as it usually decreases as the person spends more time in the facility.
Yes, and I'm glad you mentioned that persons get more or less attached to the facilities and the resources available to them in prison. And some research was done sometime back, I think, I don't want to call it a year, but it was by Dr. Karen Bailey, and it revealed that about $87.80 or so is spent per day per inmate to keep each inmate, and that comprises of the laundry, the food, and everything else. So I guess more or less they're utilizing every aspect of that and kind of getting attached. And I want to link you and the HR specialist, because I want to ask you, in your interaction with prisoners, do they tend to speak about employment or look forward to it?
Oh yes, absolutely. One of the, I would say probably the number one concern of individuals who are preparing to be released would has been, um, what will be the opportunities for gainful employment upon release. As you would imagine, many of these persons have options for employment, and they use that in quotations. They have options for employment which we would we would want them to avoid, because these options will increase the likelihood that they'll find themselves um, in a position that would lead them back to prison. So, you know, persons all often fear, and this fear is justified. They fear the stigma that they will face upon reentry. They wonder about how they can possibly overcome that. Um, because I've heard from offenders and inmates is that they were also in society before coming to prison, so they know exactly how they felt about ex-offenders when they encountered them in the world. So they expect a similar reaction upon release. So therefore, they are often deeply concerned about how they will overcome those particular challenges. Um, so one thing we do a lot of, we've done while I've been there, is to try to make help inmates make connections in the community with individuals that may be able to, or organizations that may be able to provide them with employment opportunities, because that is quite possibly the biggest challenge that many persons face. And then on the other end, when we encounter persons who have left and then return, you know, I can't think of the times. Almost every time the person would indicate that one reason that they found themselves forced to re-enter the world of crime is that they could not find any legitimate form of employment.
Well, I want to hear two more questions. I have two more questions for you. One relates to the average age of inmates that you come across. Do you find that the populace is more younger, on the younger end of the spectrum? Because, we define youth as 35 years and under. And the other question is, are the younger inmates as interested in all the things you just mentioned as the ones on the other side of the spectrum, above 35?
Yes, so you have a significant number of younger inmates who would fall into the category of the ministry considers youth. Yes, we have, say, at least half the population meets that criteria. To answer your second question, I would say that on average, these persons are less interested in those concerns. Funnily enough, what I've come to realize is that the younger offenders are more interested in entrepreneurial opportunities. Those persons have a vision of self-employment. They are not as eager to seek a assistance or employment, right? Most of these persons, I would say, at least some of the times they're thinking about how can I create something for myself that is self-sustaining, and are more willing to take that type of risk than a more mature offender.
Yes, thank you. I want to spin back to Ms. Cave Small, the HR specialist. Before we close on you last time, we were having an interesting debate about whether the ex-offender should reveal to the employer that they have been to prison. And you had said, this is a small society, people will find out regardless. I remember a time back in my day, people used to say they went to New York and they went all kind of places, and they just went off the radar, incognito. And that time they were in jail. So I don't know, but I want to know from you now whether you think that persons who went to prison, ex-offenders, are more or less more active and eager in the workplace and more effective and take their job more seriously. Have you ever come across any of those cases?
I do not have experience with working with ex-offenders, but the story I wanted to put out there
Mm-hmm.
was an experience I had in recruiting a little while ago, recruiting in another island, not here in Barbados, but another Caribbean island. And I did come across an ex-offender. And there was something about him. I really liked him. I found him quite engaging and that kind of thing. He was quite smart. He had used his time in prison as well to gain some qualifications and that kind of thing. But I noticed the gap. The gap was the flag for me. So he said something along the lines of, this is what happened to me," and that kind of thing. And he was not successful in securing the position. But this really had nothing to do with the fact that he had served time. He didn't have the requisite skills for the particular post that was open. And he reached out to me after and asked me if that was the reason he had not secured the position, the fact that he had been incarcerated. I told him no. I don't, to be honest with you, I don't know if he believed me, but I told him no because that was the truth. It wasn't because he had been incarcerated. It was just that he didn't have the skill set that we were looking for at the time. So I think that many persons who were offenders will have a challenge. I think, and the psychologist can tell me, Sean can speak to this. Some of them, I think, come to you expecting that you would already have a notch against them, that they would not be given a fair opportunity at trying to secure employment within your business.
Yeah, Sean, would you like to give a
Yeah,
response?
definitely. I can respond to that. I think Pamela is spot on. I believe because like I said, I would have spoken to many persons just before their release, and they consistently express that doubt in um, in the possibility of forgiveness, um, in the idea that someone, an employer, could look past what they've done, where they've been, and give them an opportunity. So I mean, one of the unfortunate things about prison is that it sometimes sows a deep seed of cynicism in an individual, and we try to push back against that. Because as you imagine, these persons, many of them would have had very difficult lives prior to coming to prison. They see prison as just an extension of whatever tragedy they would have experienced prior to that, and they expect that to continue. They look around, their communities, and they probably see that persons with similar life trajectories as theirs are struggling and not overcoming the challenges that befall them. So yes, I would agree with Pamela 100% that you know very often these persons are very skeptical and weary about the possibility of forgiveness and the idea of receiving a second chance.
All right. Well, we'll be right back with more on Listen Up Accord. Stay tuned. Mr. Mosley, based on the comments made by Ms. K. Small and Mr. Pilgrim, do you have any thoughts on that? Have you had persons come to the youth entrepreneurship scheme with a bit of, a skeptical feeling and feeling as though you have a nudge against them just by the mere fact that they have been incarcerated?
What I will say is that because we are focused on entrepreneurship, the whole aspect of becoming an employee is not as critical. We are just there to assist you on your path. So there may be a bit of skepticism on the part of the ex-offender about regarding the stigma that obviously is attached to the fact that they were incarcerated, but generally our experience has been positive ones. I should mention here a new initiative that started within the ministry about 2 years ago, which we refer to as the building blocks. Is an initiative where blocks within communities that are notorious and known for violence, the concept was to convert these blocks into areas of entrepreneurial activity. And we would have completed within the pilot 4 blocks thus far: Silver Hill, Parkinson Field, the Ivy, and Bonnets. And we would have trained quite a number of persons initially, and some of them were actually offenders who would have had custodial sentences. But the whole concept regarding this initiative was to impact on the recidivism rates and to give young men and women an opportunity to turn their skills into entrepreneurial ventures and give them an opportunity within their own communities. And it was key to set up the projects in within their blocks, within the place that they feel comfortable, where their peers and their families and friends could support their businesses. So I think that our system has worked well in that the program is open to anyone. We do not discriminate. Being an offender doesn't stop you from accessing our services. And actually, we have had some relatively good success stories from persons who would have been ex-offenders, but because of their passion to start their own business, to use their own creativity, to channel their energies into something that belongs to them, and they are not producing for an employer. I think this gives them extra momentum to actually work harder on their businesses. So I would say that the experiences have been good, the success stories are there, and we will continue to give persons, because most of our programs in the ministry are really second chance programs anyway, so the programs are really set up for persons to give second chance. So we have had positive feedback. As the young lady would have spoken about, Rochelle, when she came to Yes, it was just a matter of she has a passion to start this business. She was very passionate. She was very driven. And once you have that, to me, that is the key to anyone starting a business. Once you have the drive, once you have the passion, and once you are willing to take the steps along with the advice and the services that Yes offer. And there are other agencies out there, the Barbados Trust Loans that we work closely with to provide the funding. I'm sure that they embrace entrepreneurship. There isn't any discrimination against ex-offenders. So the way to go, as I would say, is the entrepreneurial route. If employers are willing to employ ex-offenders, that is good. We also have a program, even within the ministry, an employability program that actually provide skills and training for persons who would prefer to be employed. And I'm sure that this program could be, that is extended to ex-prisoners as well. So there's no discrimination, there is no ill feeling. You have done the crime, you have paid the time, and we are here to help you to take your idea to enterprise. We are here to help you on your road to becoming your own businessman.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mosley. Back to Mr. Pilgrim and Ms. Cave Small. I just want to know, how would you describe ex-offender who is unemployable, one that you just simply can't employ? How would you describe that person? Is that even a term that you use?
Who are we going to
Ms.
first?
Cave Small?
Who was it?
Okay. Yes. I don't even know if that really is a term, but it could be an apt description because there is still the possibility that someone could be employed just not within a particular type of operation. So while that person may not ideally fit traditional spaces, they may fit something that is untraditional, that is more in keeping with what Yes is offering in terms of entrepreneurship or that kind of thing. Because as been indicated, having the issue of going to prison previously presents some challenges for the ex-offender and could potentially present challenges for an employer. So in this new space that we're in, where entrepreneurship is being pushed heavily, that might be a better space for someone who would be unemployable in a traditional sense.
Yes, thank you. And Mr. Pilgrim?
Yes, what I would say is that that term is never used within the prison. And I've never used it. I've never heard anyone describe an inmate in that way. Our approach to every offender, to everyone there, is that under the right circumstances, with the right support, you can find an opportunity in the community. So what we encourage persons to do is think as widely and as creatively as possible. Yes, you may not be employable in some sectors, in some fields. You may not have the skills, you may not have the temperament, but for certain types of employment. But we want to inspire and encourage and motivate offenders to help them overcome, like I said, like I described earlier, the doubt and the suspicion and the fear. So absolutely, I met persons who they have such a complicated past and such and their psychological profile is so flawed or so damaged that I worry and I understand that these persons will need considerable degree of support going forward. But like I said, I am of the opinion, and I think everyone I've worked with believes this and conveys this to the offenders that you know you can get past this, and even though persons may doubt you, doubt is no reason for you not to try and not to give your best.
Well, Mr. Pilgrim, we have 6 minutes before we wrap up. And I'm not sure if you can see the question on the screen, but is counseling given to persons after incarceration? But while you're answering that, I want
Sure.
from each panelist, and you can go first as you'll be answering this question. I just want to know, because we've had all this talk about prison and during prison and what's not and after prison, but I want us to speak to those who've never been to prison and hopefully never will be to prison. So I want us to give them some advice, each of you, as to, what not to do and what to do to stay out of prison. Mr. Pilgrim?
Sure. Okay, that's a well. There's so many things not to do to
Tell us
to steal
some.
the person.
We only want some.
Right. So, some don't do crime. That's number one. Try to avoid the negative influences in society. I mean, that's a bit of a cliche, right? But I believe um, the best advice I could give to someone, a young person who is kind of growing and learning about life, is to find someone who they believe is a trustworthy person, and you know share, talk, um, you know open up about your fears, anxieties, and your doubts. I think a lot of times people will make poor choices based on these deep-seated, these psychological issues that are unaddressed. Um, so if someone can find an outlet, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a professional um, um, person who gives them this support, but making an attempt to understand yourself and resolving these issues in a pro-social way. I think that is one thing that can help you avoid major social problems.
Yes, I understand, and I thank you for that. But quickly, just a yes or no, because we're pressed for time. Is counseling provided after incarceration?
Well, counseling is not provided by prison staff directly. No, we encourage inmates whenever possible to stay in contact with the professionals like myself there, so we can have a sense of their progress, any challenges, and continue our supportive work. And so then other limits to how much prison officers can actually
Yes.
engage with ex-offenders. But what we would do is direct ex-offenders to the agencies in the community. There are resources that they can access.
Yes.
Was it
Mr. Pilgrim? Yeah,
Sure.
sorry, we're pressed for time, but what I'll do
Yes.
is I'll get those agencies and we'll post them for the public to see. But each
Sure.
guest, we have 30 seconds to wrap up. And what advice would you give to the others? Ms. Cave Small, then Mr. Mosley, then we'll wrap up.
Okay, my advice would be to pay attention to your surroundings. Try to choose wisely, friends wisely, choose your activities wisely. Anything that is negative, try to put some kind of distance between you and yourself and whatever that may be. Because negativity will, no doubt, lead you down the wrong path.
Mr. Mosley?
I just want to end on this. Most of the time, you canvass any young persons for as to why, or the biggest issues is always exposure to employment opportunities. Entrepreneurship is the way to go. Um, Entrepreneurship, starting your own business, managing your own business. For ex-offenders, we have that available, and we would always continue to push entrepreneurship and self-employment. That is the way to go.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Mosley. Idea to enterprise. I want to especially thank all the panelists here today, all of you who listened, all young people especially. And, we will be here next week for sure. And what we can take away from today is looking forward, we want to stay away from prison, obviously. And as employers, we certainly do not want to discriminate. And a very important point Ms. K. Small just raised was to find a mentor. And we know that there are many people out there doing great work. We have Mr. Corey Lane with the Nature Fund Ranch. We have the Rotaract, the Rotary. We have many clubs and societies out there who are doing magnificent work to keep our young people there. So this has been the Listen Up Accord by the Ministry of Youth, Sport and Community Empowerment, and see you next week at 5 p.m. Thank you.